Here we are, the last installment of preaching the women's lectionary. I don't think that's the right title, but here we are. Welcome back. I don't know what's next. If you want to make sure that you don't miss it, you can subscribe to this channel. You also can subscribe at my website, www.katejmeyer.com. And that will keep you apprised of all the things that are happening, books, podcasts, etc. So today for our final set of texts, we have a chapter in Esther, and then the reaction to the message that the women bring to the disciples. So let's start with Esther. I think oftentimes this section of Esther, and Wilcox happens to agree, is often minimized. This is not a beauty pageant. This is not something that women are battling amongst each other to be able to get to do. The women who live in the capital area, the young virgins, are brought there, meaning not very likely within their will, right? They're very likely not choosing this. The people who we know aren't choosing this are the young Jewish virgins who are under Persian control by way of being in exile because of the Babylonians, but the Persians have now defeated the Babylonians. Whether or not Esther is a true story, and there is, of course, debate about that, it is a microcosm look at how they were treated, right? They were not free to say no. They were under the control of the empire. And as women, they had, of course, even less control. So these are women taken, again, very likely against their will, captive, given a year of treatments. This is one of those details that's made to sound like, see, it's not that big of a deal. A year of skin and beauty treatments to make them more presentable so that they will be more appealing sexually to the king who's looking for a new wife. And those who he likes get sent to this second level harem of concubines. Those he doesn't deal with the after effects of that, the self-esteem after effects of that. I wasn't, even after a year of treatments, I wasn't good enough. And that's just such a messy thing that we do to women, right? Women who are berating themselves for something they didn't choose, don't want, and wouldn't have been healthy for them anyway. So the other pieces of this, we tried to kind of dance around the fact that these women are prepped and beautified to spend a night with the king. And from that night, what they choose to bring him and how the night in the bedroom goes, he then decides their value and their worth. That is what we have spent centuries trying to undo for women. To help us understand that our worth is not defined by what we look like. Our worth is not defined by how my body impacts your body. My worth is not defined by a year's worth of treatments and how attractive that makes me to you. I am not somebody else's property. So God, I think, uses this story to show resilience among the trauma and tragedy that is exile. Churches use this story to continue to minimize this sexualized view of women, to raise the level of value placed upon the attractiveness of a woman. That's not God. That's not God. At its core, I would say Esther is a story. The whole thing is a story about how when God, for whatever reason, right? We're not going to get into this today, but when God, for whatever reason, does not stop a disaster, how can God work within it? Esther is God working within this disaster upon disaster within exile. So our job today is to remind ourselves, to remind other women that we are not tied to our attractiveness. That's not our worth. That's not our value. What your body can and cannot do is not your worth and is not your value. So let me jump ahead to this road to Emmaus, this walk to Emmaus. Two disciples, one who's completely unnamed, one who is just very briefly named. I would say bulk opinion of scholars is that these are people who followed Jesus but were not part of the inner 12 or 11 by this point because Judas has died. But these are men who would have been close enough, probably picked up along the way within the 3 years, however firm that number is, followed along. So they would have heard all of the public ministry. They would have been a part of that. And so what they reveal as they are talking to Jesus, who they do not recognize because they've been prevented from doing so. Again, we're not going to unpack that today. What they hint at is the fact that the women have had already run to tell all of the remainder of the believers, which would have included the rest of the women as well, by the way, what they have just found. That the tomb is empty, that an angel has told them that he has been raised, and the varying reactions of the disciples. So Peter, we're told in Luke, kind of laughs it off, but also kind of believes it, so he runs to the tomb and finds the folded linens. I always find that an interesting detail, that the burial clothing is just all folded up neatly. Like, what? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But so these women aren't believed. And what's interesting to me is that that's the line that we use. Would you believe it? In this case, I truly don't think this is a gender thing. I think what this needs to be is the fact that these women are saying something that is wholly unbelievable. We today like to read their story and question how they didn't get it. But that's because we know the rest of the story. They lived it. And even though Jesus planted seeds throughout all of their conversations, it seems pretty natural and logical that people would have a hard time believing it. How often did the women actually hear those seeds? We don't We don't exactly know, right? We only have what the Gospels give us. So, but I do think what's interesting is these two men on the way to Emmaus, from Jerusalem to Emmaus, they're on a walk. They're unpacking what's happened in the last 3 days. That they express that the people, the disciples, had a hard time believing what the women reported. And now today, all of these years later, when Resurrection Sunday is preached, when the road to Emmaus is preached, when Pentecost is preached, the women's story is very rarely told. If it is told, it's often a footnote. I don't think it's meant to be a footnote. They are the ones. They were not the ones, the women were not the ones in that most inner of circles, right? There were times that it was just Jesus and the 12, purely. And yet, they are the ones that God sends to see the empty tomb, because they are the ones who remain. They do not scatter at his death. They remain faithful and vigilant, because there's a part of them that understood to their core what was happening. And they were not going to abandon him. And they did not. And for that, they were rewarded with being the first to receive this amazing news and then share it. How dare we minimize that experience and make it a footnote and make it something only discussed once a year, if at all? How dare we? Because all 4 of the Gospels emphasize this, and I think there's a reason for that, right? The final thing that I will say as we end this series, where I've said all along, she is called and she is speaking. Remember that God sees you as you are, values you as you are, and does place a call upon your life. You have things you are called to do, and if your community of faith, if your religious community tells you that you may not live into that call because you are a woman, or because you are transgender, or because you are gay, or because you are a lesbian, or because you are non-binary, know that that is religion. That is not God. That is religion. And it is okay, I would say it's dire, for you to find a new faith community. For such a time as this, as they say in Esther, she is called and she needs to be speaking, because the ones in power are not using their voices as they must. So let us get loud. Let us get bold. Let us turn from the empty tomb and shout the truth. And for those who choose to not hear it, that's okay. We just get louder and we repeat it more often. She is called and she is speaking. Until an unknown next time, be well. I will see you at some point in the future.